the god of the black robe. In the old Phoenician Canaanite language, you spell the name Saturn, Shabbath, Shabbat. And so if you're going to worship the planet Saturn, the Shabbat, you do it on something called the Sabbath. So when you hear in the Ten Commandments, remember to keep holy the Sabbath. Sabbath is the Phoenician name for the planet Saturn. Saturn, as a god, was always called the god of the black robe. Black is a very important color in both Judaism and the Catholic Church and Christianity because black represents Saturn. Saturn is the god who is a judge of all mankind. That's why judges in courtrooms wear a black robe. Shabbat also has another interpretation. Saturn is the seventh planet. He's also sometimes represented as the Grim Reaper, Father Time. Very interesting, all the little details about Saturn and its numbers applying to it and the colors and all of that. We get our idea about chronology from Saturn, so we have something called a calendar, chronia, the calendar. Saturn was Chronos in Greek. Another reason why Saturn was important is because Saturn was understood to be the inhibitor, one who holds you back in life. That's why when you are celebrating your God on the Sabbath, you do no work. Because the ancients said if Saturn is the inhibitor who holds us back, then we won't do anything. He doesn't have to hold us back. We'll just not do anything on Sabbath. The reason why that Saturn became known as the inhibitor, and because it circled, ancient man didn't know there were any other planets out past Saturn, so they assumed that he's the bottom line. He's the one that holds us together. Saturn is still important in Middle Eastern religions, Arabic religions. The Star of David is a six-pointed star. Well, six-pointed star is actually referred to by the reference works as a hex, a hexagram. Hex simply means six, which incidentally, in the Bible, 6 is the number of a man. How do you spell six in Latin? It's sex, S-E-X. So 6 is a six-pointed star. And today the Jews call it the Star of David, but the encyclopedias will show you that a six-pointed star is a hex, and it will tell you that it was originally the star of Saturn. So in the ancient world, some of the priests would draw a circle on the ground and draw a triangle, and then they would put another triangle obverse going the other way, which makes it a six-pointed star, and then they would be able to step inside of the circle and into the star and cast a spell on you. And so the idea was they put the hex on you. In 1977, NASA sent out the Voyager, and as that probe moved out into space, it passed over Saturn. And as it passed over Saturn, it happened to go close to the North Pole of Saturn. For some reason, on the North Pole of Saturn is a hexagram, a six-pointed hexagram on the North Pole of Saturn. Scientists cannot explain how there is a six-pointed star on the North Pole of Saturn, and what's even worse to try and explain is how come the Jews knew that Saturn was connected to 6 in a hexagram. Somehow or another, the Jews knew that six-pointed star was somehow connected to Saturn. There was no way for us to know until 1977 when the space probe went across. NASA had to explain to us that it was simply a fluke. It was something that just happened, nothing to be concerned about. Then, like 40 years later, when the Cassini craft goes out, that same hexagram is still there on Saturn. It wasn't just a little fluke. It's there on Saturn even today. In the motion picture Lord of the Rings, Sauron is portrayed as an evil eye. If you go to the South Pole of Saturn, you will see what as altogether looks like an eye, the all-seeing eye. However, if you think about the planet Saturn with its rings, if you turn the angle just right, now the rings look like two separate eyelids with the center circle as the eye. So there's a lot of mysticism connected to the planet Saturn, the Jewish religion, the Catholic.
Saturn is not a planet. It's a wandering star, or it's a luminary, and there's cymatics involved in it, and some kind of a fluid that and when you zoom in, you can see that. So Jordan Maxwell is incredibly brilliant. I'm sorry for stopping it here, but I just wanted to clarify that for anyone watching that are into the same things that I'm into regarding the shape of the Earth and fake space. Anyway,
Catholic Church and the Catholic religion. Even Islam today has a symbol of Saturn that is dominantly important to Islam. And it was a black square or a black cube. And the black cube represents the planet Saturn. Well, that's what Mecca is in Saudi Arabia, is a black cube, a black square. All over the world, large black cubes, and architecture and churches and monasteries, huge black square cubes, just like Mecca. In the movie 2001, Space Odyssey, in the book, the original book on that gave birth to the movie, in the book it was the astronauts were going to the planet Saturn to find this black cube. There again is the black cube in the planet Saturn. Anyone who studies the dark arts, the dark sciences, or the world of the occult knows that Saturn is very important to the dark side of this world in relation to religion and occultism. Saturn is the inhibitor. It'll set you back and teach you a lesson. Saturn represented government, military, the police department, governmental agencies. The Saturnalia was the celebration in Rome for the planet Saturn. And it happened like 13 days before the 25th. So it was like 12 days before what we call today Christmas. But it was the 12 days before, and it was called Saturnalia because Saturn was in Rome considered to be the god of chaos. That was another thing he was known for. What the Romans did with worshiping Saturn, they actually had 12 days of chaos in which the kings would bow to slaves and prisoners were let loose and they would be in charge of their masters who put them in prison. There was alcohol and sex and drugs and whatever you wanted. In the Roman Empire, you're free to do whatever it is you want to do. And so if you are a slave, when Saturnalia comes, you can go to the house of your master and bring him out and make him bow down and kiss your feet. So the idea was it was a chaotic time in which all law was just thrown away. And now it was up to anybody, whatever it is you want, go out and get it and take it. Today we call it Christmas. In the Roman Empire, the Saturnalia. And then there was a Brumalia, which was based on the worship of Saturn too. A very important NASA scientist named Norman Berglund has written a book called The Ring Makers of Saturn. And in that book, Norman Berglund, the scientist, shows actual pictures taken of the rings of Saturn, and one in particular has some sort of a vehicle, space vehicle, that is creating another ring. And it's not quite finished. So there's a ring on this side, and there is some kind of a space vehicle creating the ring, and it's almost ready to connect the ring, but it's not quite. And so we got some beautiful pictures. And it's going to ultimately connect it together, and that'll be a new ring in Saturn. So we know that the rings are artificial. Somebody's made them. I was speaking up in a conference in San Francisco a few years ago. He came over to me, and I wasn't expecting that. And he said, "Jordan, I've come here to meet you. I want to talk with you in private." And so we went back into the back of the restaurant and sat there, and he says, "I'm here to tell you something. I've come here. After I talk to you, I'm going home." And he said, "But you've been talking about the planet Saturn. I want to show you some things about Saturn you don't know." And so he pulls out some pictures. He had some pictures and NASA pictures. So he said, "But what we do know is that it's inhabited." My question was, could the rings be like a dish for communication in deep space? Because we have television dishes, the big dishes. Maybe the rings could be some kind of a communication device that can send out or receive from extreme distances, hundreds of light years away, with this dish set up. And he said, "Well, that's interesting. I don't know, that much about that idea." Saturn is a very important planet that balances out the positions of other stars. Jupiter and Saturn dominate our solar system. They're so large. Saturn is important in not only its physical qualities of being able to exert energy fields and sounds, but it also goes back into ancient history, which makes it really interesting. How did the ancient peoples know so much about the planet Saturn, and also associate Saturn, as they did, with dark mystical forces? Saturn is probably the dominant figure in dark religions today, in the occult world, metaphysics. Saturn plays a prominent part in all magical systems. As a matter of fact, in Germany today, there is a very powerful secret society called the Brotherhood of Saturn. The books written about them say they are probably the most important secret society on the face of the earth. They are connected behind the scenes to all kinds of powerful organizations, governments, secret societies. I think the darkness associated with the planet Saturn and the occult religions of the world has to do with some actual, in fact, influence that Saturn has on the human race that the Jewish people realize that we didn't realize. And they probably got the idea from other ancient cultures that also venerated the planet Saturn. I am convinced that the world we live in is being dominated by an extraterrestrial presence. And I think that extraterrestrial presence is the one who is feeding us our ideas about theology, religion, the occult world, governmental systems, churches. And somehow the older teachers were knowledgeable about planet Saturn. But David Icke has been talking about this too for a long time, that Saturn is a very important planet to the occult world. And it is, because if you do any research into occultism, secret societies, Freemasonry, you will find that Saturn dominates the whole subject. I think that we have been on this earth, we humans, the way we live today, we've been on this earth with other life forms, other higher and far more intelligent and creative life forms that we really haven't looked at very closely and haven't really thought much about it. But when you do that kind of research into the things which are found on the earth that we can't explain, pyramids on the floor of the ocean and great temples in the Pacific and in the Atlantic Ocean, and the pyramids of Egypt and all of the wondrous, you know, beautiful structures of the ancient and prehistoric world. There are just too many indications that there's a higher civilization that has been on this earth than we are, far higher. They understood the universe far better than we do even today. And so the Aztec, Mayas, the Incas, the Toltec peoples, the Egyptians, Babylonians, Sumerians, all of these ancient cultures were far, far smarter than we are. We've been learning from them. Our numerical system comes from Babylon. Our understanding of our religions and the concepts in our religions come from Egypt, come from the Hindus, the ancient Hindus.
Come to
So I am totally
Phoenicians,
convinced,
Canaanites.
as many other researchers and writers on the subject, that we are not as wonderful as we think we are, but there were far more uh, civilizations that were far more adept at science and taught us today. They taught us. I believe that we're being manipulated even today by what we call government and governmental officials. But if you look at the history going back 6,000 years, it seems as though there's always been an overshadowing intelligence behind our evolution and our destiny. Someone as smarter than we are has been guiding us. The idea that we have been created by a higher form of life, a higher civilization has created us. It implies that they, in creating us, have purposely not given us full potential, because you don't do that with a new experiment. You just bring it along little by little and guide it the way you want it to develop. And so we don't have the wherewithal, intellectually speaking, to break away from the masters who have created this earth and seem to feel that they own us and that they can control us. Well, we don't really have the wherewithal. And I think the reason why is because knowledge is power. And if you don't understand some of this hidden knowledge and hidden history of who we are and how we've got here, if you don't understand that, you're never going to understand why we don't have the power that we could have if we joined together. Even in the biblical understanding of the creation of man, it says that God made man and woman in his image after his likeness. And so it tells us something about our creator by looking at ourselves. Because if our creator was like us and we are in that image and likeness, then there are many good people who are working to help the human family and help to educate and to protect, while there's many bad who want to just use us for slaves. So I think that there are good um, extraterrestrial life forms here who want to see us progress, but they also are aware that we should not become too smart, because if we become too smart and too clever, we may be presenting more trouble for everyone else out there in the universe, because we're already talking about going out to the stars and setting up new civilizations on other planets. But the extraterrestrials look at us and think, wait a minute, you're talking about coming out to the stars and setting up new civilizations like the one you've got on Earth today? I don't think so. With all the violence and pornography and drug addiction and murder and all the bad blood among peoples and you're going to bring that out into the universe, you better think about that. I think the bottom line on this is that there are two sides to the story. There are some good extraterrestrials, aliens, and there are some who are evil. Same thing can be said for the human family. But that doesn't mean everyone's bad. It just means the ones who are bad are more vocal, and you see what they're doing. Because of the conditions that the world that we live in today exhibits, that there is a dark force in this world that tends to cause man heartache and tragedy and drug addiction and alcoholism. And I think, this is just my opinion, but I think that the reason why there is so much, again, drug addiction, alcoholism, the movement toward I and me and I want what I want, I think all of that is part of the frustration of the human family that realizes it's capable of so much more, but that the powers that be over us keep us down. They won't let you. If you're too smart, you're going to be in trouble. Government doesn't want you too smart unless you're working for government. I think when we were being created with some kind of an inborn or hardwired complex in us that we want to look to something higher. We want to look to a father. We want to have a mother and father, and they take care of us, and they make all the decisions for us so we can just go out and play and have fun as children because we have the authorities who take care of us. And so I think that stays with the human race because all we are today, all the adults on the earth today are just grown-up children. Most adults think like children. They don't have an education of a really well-informed adult. And so I think that's the problem, is that our makers, and whoever they were, want to keep us ignorant because that way they can control you better. I mean, when you start getting too smart, you start asking the wrong kind of questions. And now you're going to be in trouble because now you, as an investigative reporter, you're starting to look at things going on in this world that you're not supposed to talk about. The best way to control people is to keep them frightened and confused. Because if the humanity, even the Bible said basically that if the human race were to ever put down its arms and stop fighting each other and join together and use their minds and use their spirits, that they would be invincible, that they would be an incredible civilization on this earth of extraordinarily brilliant creatures, human beings. And so to keep that from happening, because if we get too smart, our creators or those who think that they own us and control us will have bigger problems trying to control us. So they keep us ignorant and ill-informed and unread and fighting among ourselves like children. That keeps us out of their way. So they don't do what we do. They don't fight each other. So I think that there is something to the idea that there is an extraterrestrial presence in our solar system, and it has been communicating with certain humans on the earth, giving them knowledge. And so the knowledge is now out there that Saturn is very important to the extraterrestrial world. This dollar bill has value because it is based on your physical body. Your flesh and blood body backs up the authority of this money. If you're an American, this money is backed up by your body. Now let me show you how. When you look at the front of the dollar bill, you will see on each side are serial numbers for this particular dollar bill, are serial numbers. If you look on the back of your Social Security card, you will see the numbers on the bottom. The numbers on the bottom, usually in red, represent your blood on the New York Stock Exchange. It represents your physical body. That's why the numbers are in red, representing your blood. Now, when you take the the numbers on the Social Security card and put it next to the serial numbers on the dollar bill, you will see it's the same sequence of numbers and letters. And so what it's actually telling you is that there's like whatever the amount is, 24 million or 4 million or $6 million, whatever it is that your body is worth on the New York Stock Exchange, there's that much money out there all over the world in fives and tens and hundreds with your Social Security number on it. So these numbers line up exactly correct the same way. The numbers can be in blue, black, or red. And so this is why years ago, we used to say the government is just going to beat you black and blue. Because black and blue are colors that are used in banking. You have to sign with a blue or black pen, or you can sign with a red pen, which represents your blood. Your physical body is really very important to the corporation called the United States Corporation. That, again, is why they want you to wear your seat belt and have insurance. And in case something does happen to you, you need to have insurance. Why? Because the government doesn't want to pay for you to be in a hospital. They want you out making money for them. They don't have to put the money in to protect you in a hospital. Go get your own insurance. Let them pay for it. The real powers behind banking today in America is insurance companies. Insurance companies are the most powerful hand behind the world of money because it has something to do with the 14th Amendment and how we were changed over from sovereignty, man, woman, and child, into a U.S. citizen. During the 1870s, when the corporation was being born in the minds of the politicians here, when they realized the United States of America was no longer a viable entity because we are a lot of things, but united isn't one of them. So we're no longer a United States, but we're a corporation. And so therefore your body now becomes a security for that corporation and needs money. It's a big corporation and needs money coming in. So that's why they want you to stay safe and drive safe so that you can make money. They don't want to put money out on you. They need you to go out and make money for themselves. This changeover from being sovereign, man, woman, and child sovereigns, which means you are your own law. But when we changed over from the United States of America into a corporation in 1870, and we became known to the world as the United States Corporation, not the United States of America. From 1870 to the First World War and then the Second World War, the United States corporation went broke, financing all these escapades around the world with wars and revolutions and paying other countries to be our friends and all that. So the corporation called United States went broke. So they had to go back to the old days, go back to the British banking cartels who can print money out of nothing and had the ability to finance anything they wanted to do. And so the corporation had to borrow money from the British bankers to keep this corporation going because the corporation's broke. And you don't want to go broke when you got millions of people who want to eat tonight and the company, the United States, no longer is operable because it's broke. So the United States went to the European banking system and asked for loans to give us some money, loan us some money so we can keep our corporation going. Well, the bankers there said, well, why would we do that? You are already broke. So why would we turn around and give you money when we know you're broke? So how are you going to pay us back if we did give you the money? So the British bankers and the international bankers in Europe came up with a brilliant idea. We'll loan you the money on whatever it is you need. We'll give you a blank check and you can do whatever you want with it and we'll loan you the money. But what we want is we want your citizens as collateral. And so the idea was we'll give you lots of money, but we want your daughter, okay? We want your son. We want your wife. And so today we are collateral for the money that was borrowed to keep the corporation going back in the 1870s to the First World War. And so today we still talk about how we have a national debt. We have to pay off this national debt. No one's ever asked the question, who are we paying off? Who are we in debt to? My God, I thought we were the most powerful country in the world, and we're the envy of the whole world, and yet we have a national debt. And so the politicians thought, no, what it is just that we owe ourselves. You know, we do a lot for you, and so we've spent a lot of money on you, building your bridges and all that kind of stuff we do. And so we just want to keep it in the house. So you need to pay us, your government. Yeah, but it's not your government. It represents the bankers of Europe and England. And there is a debt, and you will pay it, because the British bankers loaned us a lot of money to build our railroads and our airports and our highways and all kinds of things that we've been building America. And it's very impressive. Yeah, but you don't have any money. You went broke during the First World War. And so that's why we today are a collateral for the debt. We do have a national debt. And ultimately, at the bottom line is the Vatican. The Vatican is the ultimate bottom line on all of this dark dealings behind the scenes with bankers in Europe, wars and violence. The whole banking establishment is based on the Vatican canon law. It's a very big story about the history of the world. The 33rd president of the United States was Harry Truman. And Truman made an interesting statement. Somebody asked him, is there anything going on in history that we haven't been told? And he said, the only thing that's hidden in history are the facts of life that you don't know. How this country really was founded, and where the money really came from, and who you really are. That you don't know, well, that's the real hidden history of this country. All of this stuff that you think you understand, nobody really understands how this system works. It's based on your blood, it's based on your body, it's based on putting your children up as collateral for later bills. It's a remarkable story, and it brings into play the Pirates of the Caribbean, the Federal Reserve, international wars. Like used to many years ago, they used to say, war is good business. You should invest your son. It's just a business. Today, we even have people called fight promoters. They put up the money and they organize the fight and they pick out who's going to fight who, and they pay both sides. And the whole thing is a show. This is why during wartime, you'll hear the generals talking about the wars in the Pacific theater or the wars in the Atlantic theater. A theater is a word used in relation to a show. And that's why, because it is a show. And then you get into the esoteric symbols. On the dollar bill side with the pyramid has 13 layers. There are 13 layers in the pyramid. There are 72 stones in the pyramid. The pyramid has an all-seeing eye that's not touching the pyramid. Above it, it has the letters in Latin says Annuit Coeptus. Basically, Annuit Coeptus simply means our enterprise or our project now is a success. What project? What is it that's a project that's now a success? On the bottom, it says Novus Ordo Seclorum. Novus is a novice, meaning new. Ordo is order, and Seclorum is secular, which means of the world. It's secular. It's a secular project, and it seems to be working. So our project is now a success. What? The new order of the world. When you hear people talk about the New World Order, it's on the American dollar bill, New World Order. And it's based on what? It's based on the ancient Egyptian concepts of government, finance, law, and the way the ancient Egyptians understood the world at large. That's why you have a pyramid. Now, interesting, the word pyramid comes from, it's actually two words. A lot of people don't know this. Pyramid is two words put together, pyra and mid. Pyra is fire, like pyromaniacs. Pyrotex is fire. And mid simply means middle. So you put the two together, it becomes pyramid, or the fire in the middle. This is why today, when you go into public buildings like restaurants and hotels, you will see the restrooms for male and female, right? And on the male restrooms, all over in the public, will always be a pyramid. It's always a triangle or a pyramid on a male restroom. Women's is always a circle on the women's. Why? Because the pyramid is fire in the middle. And so the idea was that the fire of sex is in the middle of the human body. And so the women are also involved with this. They're called the circle of life. They keep the circle of life going. Without the women, there's no children. You'll see around the pyramid, you will see a circle, and that symbolizes the sun. And that symbolizing the sun has to do with Stonehenge. Stonehenge seems to be connected to the Great Pyramid of Egypt because they've used the same identical measuring inside Stonehenge as they used in the pyramid. The connection between Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid of Egypt, not all the pyramids, only that one pyramid called the Great Pyramid. And that's not the big one in the middle. That's the one just before it, is actually called the Great Pyramid. And that Great Pyramid uses what is called the pyramid inch. It has to do with what the Egyptians called the sacred cubit, but that's another story. But the pyramid inch is used in the pyramid and in Stonehenge. This eye in the pyramid is representing the Egyptian sun god. The eagle, of course, represents the sun, and of course, on one side, we see that there's 32 feathers in one wing of the eagle and 33 on the other wing. 32 and 33 are Masonic numbers, the 32nd degree and then the 33rd degree. And of course, when you're going into court, they're going to give you the 3rd degree. And so showing that the courts are all Masonic construction to start with. So if you're not a Mason, you need to stay out of court. Right? You better find out what you're doing when you go into court, because they're going to give you the 3rd degree. You will see 13 stars above the eagle's head, but the 13 stars are in the configuration of what we call the Star of David. And it's actually a 6-pointed star, which is a hexagram. We call it the Star of David, but that is not correct. Actually, in point of fact, it's called the Star of Saturn. And look it up in the encyclopedias, and you will see a 6-pointed star has always been referred to as the Star of Saturn. But Saturn plays a very big part today in the world religions. The 13 stars, there are 13 arrows, there are 13 berries and leaves. There are 13 strips on the eagle's chest for the original American flag. The tail of the eagle has 9 feathers. There's a reason why. 9 is very important to the secret societies of Freemasonry coming out of the Vatican. The Vatican Freemasonry, York and Scottish Rite Freemasonry, they all realize that there's something very important about the 9 feathers, because the tail feathers of a bird help it direct its flight. It can decide where it wants to go according to the tail feathers. The reason why this is important, because if you look up the history of the Knights Templar, they were referred to as the Knights of the Temple of Solomon. Today it's in the Wailing Wall, is the Knights of the Temple of Solomon, is at the Wailing Wall. But if you look up in the dictionaries or encyclopedias the history of the Knights Templars, Today, what is called Knights Templars, we in America today call them the international bankers. The banking elites, like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and all of these international elites, all are referred to in law as Knights Templars. But the bottom line on this is that if you look up the history of the Knights Templars in encyclopedias, it will tell you that this Knights Templars were founded by 9 men. 9 men founded the Knights Templars. And then they will give you some story about how these 9 men got together after the Crusades, once the Holy Land was protected under the Pope's dominion, and that there were so many people wanted to go to the Holy Land. It was very dangerous traveling in those days in the deserts to go to see the Holy Land. Those 9 men got together, the reference works say, and they formed a protection for the pilgrims going from Rome and from Europe over to the Middle East. Well, logic alone would tell you 9 men are not going to protect anybody. They're not going to go and protect all the millions of pilgrims going to the Middle East with 9 men. That was a cover story. But the actual story was that the Knights Templars were 9 Catholic Masonic order Freemasons who were putting together for the Vatican a whole new superstructure of money and banking and government, and the entire operation was under the Vatican control, and there were 9 men who were in charge of that project of rebuilding a new order in Europe. And so that's why the eagle has the 9 tail feathers. And most of the members of secret societies know that. If you bring this up, they'll tell you, yeah, well, there was no 9 men who protected the pilgrims. No 9 men could do that. The eagle has always been the symbol for the sun. Why? Because it has an eagle eye. It can see everything, and it's high up. The ancient peoples they saw their eyes were perfectly round, and then they look at the sky and see the sun is perfectly round. And then in their mind, the sun represented light, which light means intellectual, spiritual intelligence. You're enlightened instead of being ignorant and ill-informed and in the dark. And so they figured that God must be very bright. He's very brilliant. And so if you follow God, the sun, you're his pupil. And so that's why today we have a pupil in the eye, because the sun is round. And we are his pupil. We're following him. I remember reading back in the 60s that the dimensions of the dollar bill were based on the old Arabic dimensions of a magic carpet. They said that this was like a magic carpet. It is. You got enough of them, you can go anywhere. Lots of interesting things about the American dollar bill and our actual real history of where we've come from. Today, we're going to talk about corporations. The United States of America no longer exists. And the reason why it doesn't exist, we are now a corporation. We're not a country. And the reason why is because many years ago, there was something happened here called the Civil War. And the Civil War, we're told, was one of the bloodiest wars humans have ever fought on the earth. It was a very bloody war. And so after it was over, it was understood that we are now, after the war, many things, but united was not one of them. One half of the country was killing the other half. And there's a lot of bad feelings among the Americans back and forth between North and South. Well, it was decided, all right, then let's do this. Let's have a United States corporation. We'll start a company, and we'll call it the United States Corporation. It'll be a privately run municipal corporation, and we'll call it the United States Corporation. So therefore, everyone who is here will become an employee of the corporation. If you're working for this corporation, when you're on duty, you always usually have some sort of an identification tag showing that you're an employee of the company. As long as you are working and you're making money, then you are contributing to the company, the corporation. You're on the company time, so to speak. And so you are making money, and therefore you're paying out bills and paying out taxes and fines and fees and all of that. And so you are securing the corporation. They need the money. And so you're giving them the money. You're making the money and giving it to them. So you are a security. Water is the basis for our economics, period, on the earth. Because in the ancient world, going far back as the earliest times of the Roman Empire, the powers that be in the world then realized that they started to build their economic system in the Roman Empire based on the Phoenician Canaanite system of commerce in the Middle East, because they knew how to make money and they knew how to control money. So the ancient Romans understood and finally figured out that there should be two laws on the earth. The earth is two things. The earth is water and land. So there should be a law for the water and a law for the land. So today we even have terms that say, well, that's the law of the land. Why do you distinguish it law of the land? Because there's another law called the law of the sea or the law of water. So the law of the land is the laws that govern the culture of people on a particular spot of land. And so when you go to another country, you should be aware that there's a law of the land, which means there's a custom. You have to get used to the way people live and the way they do things. There's another law that supersedes that law, which is far more important. It's called the law of the sea. And the law of the sea is the law of water. And the law of water is simply banking, banks. Banks are all over the world. All banks operate the same. They operate on water. And so the bottom line is that your commerce is based on water. All ships, airships, rocket ships, sailing ships, I don't care what it is. If it's a ship, it's always referred to as a female. It's always she. The captains of any ship will tell you, oh, she's a good ship and she's seaworthy and oh, she's this and she's that. What do you mean she? The reason why captains call their ships she is because she delivers the product. And the product is usually based on water. And when her water breaks, there's a product. And the product was caused by the male manufacturing. So he has manufactured and she is in labor building the product. And so the product is based on water because when her water broke, the product comes out. If you're going to get married, you have to have a license, because getting married, according to our laws today under the corporation, if you are getting married, you are an employee whose first duty is to the corporation. And so therefore you need to work and pay your bills and pay your taxes and everything because you're a security for the body social. The body social means the whole company. When you retire, which means you're going to bed, you're going to sleep, or you're going to quit, you're going to retire, you get Social Security. No, you are the security for the body social. And so they're going to give you a few dollars to live on, keep you alive, because if they don't, you're going to get all very upset. You don't have any money to live on, and they're going to cause more trouble. Give him something to live on and get him out of here, right? When a ship pulls into port, because I said all of our commerce is done by water, our biggest business is shipping, all over the world, shipping. When a ship pulls into harbor, it parks at its what we call its berth. It's a berth where they're berthing the ship, berth. And so any item that was on that ship represents money. Therefore, Every time a television or a car or anything, whatever that item is that's being brought here from another country, it's coming in on a ship, and she is bringing in the product, right? She. When the ship parks, it's sitting in its berth. And therefore, every single item coming off of that ship has to have its own certificate of manifest. Why? Because yesterday the ship wasn't here. But this morning you come to work and there's a ship here with $800 million worth of Toyotas. So it's manifested. So you have to have a manifest. And it's called a certificate of manifest, which goes with each one of those products. And on that manifest, it tells you, is it a 4-door? Is it 2 doors? Does it have air conditioning? What nationality is it? How much does the baby weigh? What color eyes does he have? And, and does he have 5 fingers? And is he African or what? Does he have air conditioning? So you are simply a product because you are a product that has to have its own certificate of birth. So therefore you have today something called a birth certificate. And it has to be signed by the dock because that's where the ship is sitting, at the dock. And if you happen by chance to have one of the cars or one of the TVs drop off in the ocean, that's okay. There are insurances that cover that, but you have to have a death certificate. Why? Because you're not just going to lose a car and the bank is not going to make money on that. You lost a car? Yeah, well, you better go find it. And if you can't find it, then you need to go through the regulations and sign a death certificate. And that's why, as I said, that's why you have to have a license, because this is a corporation. And used to, when we were a republic, you could wear a gun anytime you wanted, and you could go into town and go in the bar, and if you have a falling out with a guy in the bar, you can either settle it like gentlemen, or you can go out in the street and duel. And one of you is not going home tonight, see? Why? Because it was a free country. And individuals, men and women and children, when this country was founded, was said to be, and it was understood that you are a sovereign in this country. That's why you could wear a gun anytime you wanted. Cowboys wear guns, and then people even in the eastern states would wear guns. Why? Because you are a sovereign under international law. Anyone born in the United States of America was a sovereign, which means you're a king or a queen. And so the man was king of his realm, king of his home. And women were the queens. A king and a queen have the privilege of declaring war on any time they please, on anyone they please. That's one of the nice things about being a king. You don't need to ask anybody permission. You want to go out and pick a fight? Well, you better have a gun with you. It doesn't mean you're going to win. It doesn't mean you're smart for doing that. It just means you're armed and you're going to face another guy and he's armed. So you better figure out if you can do this or not, right? Now we understand that your body is like 78% water. And when you come out of your mother, her water broke. So therefore, everything we do in commerce is based on water. And that being the case, it's based on shipping. The idea is don't rock the boat when you're at work. Don't rock the boat. We run a tight ship here. We don't want to rock the boat. And so are you with us, mate? Yeah, come aboard on the citizenship. And so now you got the dealership and sportsmanship and citizenship and all the different kind of words that end in ship. Why do you have banks? Where do you find banks? Banks are on both sides of a river. They're called river banks. What does a river bank do? It directs the flow of the currency. Money runs through your hands like water. No, money is water. That's when you put it into a bank, it's called currency. Because it's a current, it's an ebb and flow. Comes in and goes out, and comes in and goes out. It's a flow of money. And then money is water. Money is a cash flow, a liquid asset. There's a reason why everything works the way it does. In a corporation, let's say you work for General Electric or Ford Motor Company. General Electric cannot make law like stamped in stone. Whatever General Electric does, they don't have the power to create law. But they do have the power as a corporation to make their policy. And so they will tell you, look, it's just our policy. There's no damn law. There's no law that says it. But our policy is for you to show up at 7 o'clock in the morning. That's just our policy. And our policy says that you take off at 11:30 for lunch and you go home at 4 o'clock. That's just our policy. It's not written in stone in God's law. It's just our policy. So today, you ask any politician, what kind of law do we have in this country today? And they would tell you it's called public policy. It's a policy. It's not law. Who came up with that policy? Well, we have policy makers. Oh, really? Policy makers. Oh, okay. Yeah, they're lawmakers. They're the lawmakers. They make the policy. They don't make law. They make a policy. And it's just our policy that you do this and you do that, and you go 65 on the highway, and you do this, you park there, and these are all just our policy. And the police will see to it you abide by it. So that's where the police come in, because back in the John Wayne days, in the cowboy and Indians, there was no police. Why? Because you have a constitution. You're a free man and can do whatever you please to do. But you take care of yourself. There's no government checks. There's no government anything. You just take care of yourself. And if you want to buy a gun, buy 10 of them. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares. You're free as an American. But today, you're no longer an American. You are a U.S. citizen. U.S. is a privately owned company, a corporation. It's called a municipal corporation. It's a company. Well, according to corporate law, you have to have, this is in all corporate law, you've got to have a president of the corporation. That's just corporate law. You've got to have a vice president of the corporation, and you've got to have a secretary treasurer. Because those three guys are the main ones that handle the money. And since we are giving you permission, I'm giving you permission because I'm playing the part of God. I am the corporation, 1870. But if I'm going to give you the privilege, and you can be a corporation too, but I gave you permission. So I want 20% off the top. You understand? It's just business. When we're talking about the Federal Reserve, first thing you need to understand is where is the Federal Reserve's corporate headquarters, because it's going to tell you something when you find out. Corporate headquarters for the Internal Revenue and the Federal Reserve is in Puerto Rico, not the United States corporation. And why is it in Puerto Rico? Because Puerto Rico was picked long time ago, over 1,000 years ago. It was picked by the pirates of the Caribbean. That's why today Puerto Rico houses the Federal Reserve and the Internal Revenue. It's because the Federal Reserve is today the pirates of the Caribbean. When you begin to see that this is the whole setup in the Federal Reserve and the Internal Revenue, it's just piracy. It's just the pirates of the Caribbean, and that's where they started. So what was the symbol for the pirates of the Caribbean? Well, their flag was a black flag with a skull and crossbones, and it was referred to as the Jolly Roger. Well, today, the skull and crossbones are a very important symbol used in World Freemasonry. It's used on toxic and poisonous medicines and things. Skull and crossbones basically meant death. Well, that's what piracy in the Caribbean was like. It was a very dangerous and deadly game where they were stealing on the high seas. And so when you're stealing something on the high seas, then you have to deal with an admiral, which gives us our word admiralty law. Admiralty law is the law of the high seas. England, in order to travel the world and do what they did to build their great empire, were great seafaring peoples. Their navies were next to none. And so this is where the idea that even in England today, they have such a thing as an admiralty. And so it gives birth to an admiralty law, which means it's giving birth to a law based on water. Why? Because England were the masters of the seas. after the Spanish. And so today, it's just interesting that the Federal Reserve and the Internal Revenue are corporate headquarters in the Caribbean. As it still is today, ships will carry their own flag so that anyone else on the sea will see that ship with that flag and understand who owns it and who's controlling that ship. Well, they developed an idea a long time ago among the pirates to fool their victims, and they would put up a flag of a country that was friendly with, I guess, the other ships coming, and so the other ships would not think anything about it until they got close enough to attack them. Then they would send up their Jolly Roger flag, the flag that represents the pirates. Then the people on the other ship know they're so close now. They thought it was a friendly ship. Now they find out it's a pirate ship. And so that's where we get the concept today of a false flag. And my goodness, there are false flags everywhere in the world that we live today. So many people think that if you trust some country or trust somebody to do something for you and he's a friend, and then one day you find out they're not your friend. They've never been your friend. Then we see the idea of a false flag. They were putting up their false colors. We even say that kind of thing today, that, wow, I was with so-and-so last night, and he showed his true colors. True colors? What do you mean, a false flag? Yeah, because he's always been nice, he's always been courteous, and last night he was horrible. So now he's showing his true colors. So that tells me he's been putting up a false flag all this time. Now we know who he really is, or how he really thinks. I would say, first of all, it's not federal, and it's not a reserve, because it isn't. There has no reserve. They just print money. And they don't really print money. They print what they call a Federal Reserve note. And it says on the Federal Reserve note, it says this note is legal tender for privates, public and private. And then it used to also say that you could take this to the bank and turn it in for real money. That's what it said on the bills. 50 to 100 years ago, it was say on the bill, you can take this to the bank and turn it in for real money. So right off the bat, they're telling you this is not money. It represents money, but it's not money. And so you don't have to go around with gold coins buying everything. Just take the dollar bills that represents the gold coin. But the problem is the government and the founding of this country, the Constitution doesn't say that it's all right to have paper that represents money. No. Money is gold and silver, period. End of the day, that's it. It's either silver or gold, or it's not money. And so if you're going to print paper, and incidentally, in California, the 1848 California Constitution, there's two of them, 1848, and I think the other was 1869. But the 1848 original Constitution of California expressly says no banking can be done within the state of California. California will not allow any banks to exist in the state of California, period. You can have private corporations who will deal within themselves, but no bank can operate within the state of California. Then later on, they had a civil war, and after the Civil War, well, things changed a little bit. So now you can have a bank in California. So many of our wars are actually economic. The Federal Reserve, I think it was established back in 1913. The way it was established was that the bankers in America, who were not actually American, they were living in America, but they were actually British-backed bankers, J.P. Morgan, bankers like that, who actually came from Europe and from England, they got together and they decided to put together a trick and to see if it would work. And so they got together on a private island off of the coast of Georgia. And I'm not an authority on this, but it's well known that these men met on this island called Jekyll Island. Why would it be called Jekyll, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? Is because these bankers were not interested in protecting America. They were interested in buying off everything in America for their British masters. And so they came up with an idea that we will produce paper money, which represents money, and if we can get that across through the Congress and the Senate agrees to that, then we will also add a little something we forgot to tell you. It is called fractional banking. Fractional banking means every dollar we publish that we give to you, that dollar can make us, you can multiply it by 10, by 9 or 10. So when somebody puts a dollar into the bank for on deposit, the bank can then say that deposit was $10. Well, if you put in 100, the bank can say on their records that you put 1,000 in. But if you put $1 million in, the bank now says that you put $10 million in. And that's how America has become so powerful around the world. Because no matter how much money no matter how many Federal Reserve notes we have, there may be millions in the bank, but you can multiply it by 10. And so therefore, oh my goodness, then you can multiply that later by 10. And now you've got a country that has a massive amount of money. If you put, say, $10 in the bank is allowed to loan out to other people 100, because they can multiply anything that comes into their bank, they can multiply it by 10. It's called fractional banking. It's pretty well known that there is an organization in the world today called the Round Table Group. And our idea of this round table group is a round table of the big bankers, the big shots that run the British Empire. And they come together and they sit at a round table. Why they are required to sit at a round table, because the idea is not one of them is the boss of bosses. It's a group, and they're all equal around the table, but they're all bankers, and they're all working for the same cause. And so ultimately, people don't realize that all around the world, especially in America, you're buying things and purchasing things. And so in 1902, these bankers, these London bankers, they met in 1902, and the idea was that they were going to slowly but surely infiltrate into the United States' business and ultimately get the United States of America into debt, and so that they will ultimately be able to own the United States of America for England. We have documented evidence that the Federal Reserve is a part of that plan to actually take over America and do it in such a way as to get America involved in business, so that eventually the British banking cartels around the world will ultimately own the corporation called United States. And so that's what happened today. We are now under the authority of the British government, in point of fact. Under this system of the Federal Reserve, it was supposed to be, what we were told is that the Federal Reserve was being put together to protect the fluctuation in business. Sometimes we make money, sometimes we're broke, but to make sure that we always have a nice, even flow of money, we need someone to control that. And so once they bought into that idea and accepted the Federal Reserve, now you've had 2 world wars, and God knows how many wars are going on each day that the Federal Reserve is financing the militaries around the world. And the more you finance the militaries, the bigger the wars get. Now they're all over the world. And so we see that as any normal big fight, any prize fight, you've got to have a fight promoter. And this person, as the fight promoter, is going to put up the money for the fight and finance the event. and pay all the bills for everybody. But he's the fight promoter. Why? He's spending millions of dollars. But he's spending millions because he's going to make multiple millions on the fight. So we have today the Federal Reserve, the Internal Revenue, and the secret government that's operating out of London. And ultimately, they are the fight promoters. They're causing the wars all around the world. And United States citizens and people are getting involved, in these wars, never realizing these wars are being financed to have a fight, period. They're called fight promoters. First of all, what we are talking about when I say the dawn of a new day, it's a catchphrase that means something to powerful people in the world that we're not supposed to know anything about. Like George Carlin said, it's a big club and you ain't in it. But if you were in the big club, you would already know what that catchphrase, dawn of a new day, really means. So in order to explain this the best way I can, we need to go back to the California legislature back in 1953. It's called the 11th Report, Senate Investigating Committee on Education, published by the Senate of the state of California. And in it, the lead article talks about the fact that since many intelligent people seem to be unaware of the secrecy of governments and secrecy of things going on that we're not being told. And so the state of California Investigating Committee back in 1953 said, we would like to make a few things clear to you, that communism is rampant around the world. And so as the California State Senate is saying that we would like for you to understand that communism is not synonymous with Russia. Communism is all over the world. Russia just happened to be the first victim. It goes on to say that communism is actually a self-perpetuating group of people who want to control power all over the world and are using communism to exploit the people. It goes on to say that so-called, this is in the California Senate report, and I'm going to read this because it's very important. It says, so-called modern communism is apparently the same hypocritical and deadly world conspiracy to destroy civilization that was founded on the secret order of the Illuminati in Bavaria in 1776, and that raised its hoary head in our colonies here at the time of the revolution. See World Revolution by Nestor Webster. There's a book on that subject. It says the world revolution conspiracy appears to have been so well organized as to be ever continuing and ever on the alert to take advantage of every opportunity presenting itself or that the conspirators could create. It is significant in this connection that as early as 1783, when unsettled conditions and dissatisfaction in some quarters, a subversive anonymous sermons were circulated among the colonial army to incite dissatisfaction and rebellion. George Washington immediately called the army together, and in addressing them, he said, "My God, what can this writer have in view by recommending such measures? Can he be a friend to the army? Can he be a friend to our country? Rather, is he not an insidious foe, some emissary perhaps from New York, plotting the ruin of both by sowing seeds of discord and separation between the civil and military powers of the national and of this continent? And what a compliment does he pay to our understanding when he recommends such measures, and either alternative is impractical in their nature." And this was taken from Marshall's Life on Washington. He goes on to say, "It is plain that George Washington believed that the center of this secret conspiracy to be, so far as this country was concerned, to be located in New York City, and felt it to be his duty to make such a charge." And here it goes on to talk about the recognition of May 1st, 1776 as the founding date of the World Revolution conspiracy is not difficult to understand when it is realized that May Day is still today frequently celebrated, even in the recent times, by rioting and bloodshed on a worldwide scale. It's a very interesting story about the beginnings of world communism and how it was financed and who actually put this world movement together. In the book Conspiracy Against God and Man, it says much of what the historians had to say is enlightening. He cited, for example, the explicit testimony of one who was himself in close touch with the inner circle that founded communism, and it may be presumed to possess accurate knowledge of its activities. And he was quoting this doctor who in April of 1914, in an issue of a French occult magazine called Mystia, under the pseudonym of Papias, wrote and this is what this individual doctor who was a member of the Illuminati said, side by side with international politics of each state, there exist certain obscure organizations of international politics. These men that take part in these councils are not the professional politicians or the brilliantly dressed ambassadors, but certain unpretentious, unknown men, high financiers, who are superior to those who, in their ephemeral politicians, who imagine that they govern the world. So basically, this person who is a member of the Illuminati is basically saying the people who think they run the world, the politicians, do not make the decisions, period. Secret Societies and Subversive Movements is a book that came out many years ago by Nesta Webster, in which she really explains and goes into the background of the Illuminati and the general secret societies and fraternal orders that are operating around the world to overthrow governments and to overthrow especially America, because America has been the leader around the world and introducing the concepts of freedom and liberty and justice. And so these secret societies are not interested in the people being educated or being free. So there's a world of conspiratorial apparatus operating around the world to overthrow the United States and overthrow the whole idea of freedom and liberty and justice. That brings us to the symbolism of the Illuminati, the rising sun, because the sun is very dynamic in its rising in the morning for all of mankind. It brings light into the world. It brings life into the world. So let's talk about the sun itself as a powerful symbol. We see that the sun lights the whole world. Well, this is why the secret societies are very big on promoting what they call light. You know, they're brilliant, they're intellectually superior, and so they have the right to run the whole world for us. They're called the Illuminati because they're illuminated symbolically by the sun. So we have the sun as a symbol for illumination. And now, far back in mankind's history, we can see ancient sun worship. You know, the ancient military used to wear sun helmets. Romans wore sun helmets, and even today we have cultures around the world that are celebrating with headdresses, sun headdresses. So the idea of man being dominated by the sun is nothing new. And one of the oldest symbols of the sun was and still is an eagle. Eagles have always represented the sun, and the eagle, incidentally, has two wings, left wing and right wing. This is why in America you have something called left-wing politics and right-wing, because of the American eagle represents the sun order. All cultures have always recognized the eagle as the best sun symbol because it flies very high, it watches everything, its eyes are very sharp to see everything, and it dominates the skies. That's all there is to it. And so the sun does dominate the sky. And so the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks used the sun symbol and the eagle to represent the sun. You'll see it in Rome, you'll see it in Greece, you'll see it on coins, and you'll see this coin is in Italy. Here's the Roman signature, and incidentally, the Roman signature, SPQR, stands for the Senate and the people of Rome. Fascists around the world, political fascists, have used the eagle. We see it being used everywhere in the fascist world. The Italian Mussolini, one of the bringers of fascism into the world was Mussolini. His insignia was the eagle. And here we have an Italian fascist coin. And on that coin, you will see the eagle perched upon the fasci. It's a bundle of sticks with a hatchet head. That's another subject for another time, but a very important symbol. An eagle perched upon a fasci. And so here's another picture of another coin. And on the right, you will see the eagle is perched on a fasci, a bundle of sticks that is tied together. It means something. It's a very important symbol. What I think is important is that the American quarter is the same, identical as the Italian fasci, because America is based on the old ancient Italian Roman fascist system. And so the Nazis used the eagle. The eagle is replete throughout the world, especially in national coats of arms, political seals. And there we have a classic example of the eagle actually representing the sun. This is why you see the seal of the President of the United States with the eagle on the back of the dollar bill. But this particular seal of the President of the United States is just cram-filled with fascinating implications when you do the research into the whole seal on the back of the American dollar bill, $1 bill. It is a very important group of symbols. It's all based on the number 13, the 13 arrows and 13 berries and 13 leaves. And here we have 13 stars above the eagle's head. And it's in the configuration of all 13 stars is the Star of David, as you will see. And the 13 lines, the whole seal is based on the number 13. The sun in its rising brings light into the world. And so it became a very powerful symbol for secret societies, especially Freemasonry, to give the idea that they're bringing light into the world. And that's what the sun does. One half of the earth is in darkness and sleeping, while the sun is moving across the earth and waking people up. And so it's a war going on in heaven continually between light and darkness. The sun has always symbolized not only light for mankind to see his way each day, but more importantly, intellectual and spiritual enlightenment of the inner soul and the mind of mankind. So therefore, the sun has always been used for newspapers and magazines that are bringing new ideas and new concepts. So we see so many newspapers and magazines carry the word the sun. The New York Sun, the Sunday Sun Times, Sun Sentinel, the heart of your community is the sun. So we see that the idea of the sun is in almost all newspapers around the world. Why? Because the sun brings light into the world, where these magazines are trailing on that idea that they're bringing light and intellectual enlightenment to the world. Here we have the idea of the sun rising between two mountains, and this is a very important symbol, the sun rising between two mountains. Here we see on a ring, the sun rising between the mountains of the east. There's a sensational amount of material on the idea of the sun rising between two mountains. And many of the presidents of the United States have said that and said publicly that they see themselves as representing the sun rising between two mountains, between the mountains of the east. Well, here we have British Columbia with the sun rising behind the mountains. Here's the Lady Liberty walking toward the mountain. You'll see the sun rising. This particular coin in America is called the Dawn of a New Day coin, where the sun is rising on a new time, a new day. Now, the Soviet Communist
Hello.
World Movement,
Still
when
here.
it took over Russia, there were many different smaller countries in Russia, and they all had to accept the idea of the sun rising behind the mountains. And here you will see the idea is always the same thing, the sun rising behind the mountains of the east. And we see it today in all of our advertisements. Here on a stamp in America, we have a stamp which is almost identical to the eagle which is used by the Nazi Party. It looks like a Nazi fascist symbol. And you'll see the sun rising between the two pyramids of the two mountains. Now, in churches and religions in general, you will see the Sermon on the Mountain, the sun rising behind the mountain, and stained glass windows in churches. Here's a church in England, and the altar has the sun rising between two mountains. You will see it all around the world, this general idea of the sun rising behind the mountains. But what's important about this is that this is an Illuminati, secret society symbol, which then begins to show you how pervasive the Illuminati and the secret societies are in world religions and world government and world finance. Even in the Islamic world, they still have the same symbol as we do. Basically, it means the two mountains goes back to the ancient Egyptian with the two statues, and that welcomes the sun each morning. And there were two large statues, and when the sun came up in front of them. The rising sun of the morning is called the dawn. So when spirituality and intellectual enlightenment comes into your heart and your mind, we say things like, oh, it just dawned on me, what you were saying. Oh, that just dawned on me. Dawn implies the sun has finally brought light into your life, and you see now something you didn't see before. If you can go back to Christian New Dawn and do some research on that, you will see that Easter is referred to as a new dawn, when the sun is rising again. Even in the Kabbalah, there's an article about the Kabbalah, talks about the fragrance of Eden, where the one who is caught between the suns of a dying and a dawning day. Watch the way this term, new dawn and dawn of a new day, keeps playing itself into all the political rhetoric going on, all the political speeches. Politicians are using this term. Bush sees a bright dawn emerging. Brown calls for a new world order. Here, the American Catholic Weekly magazine calls it a new world coming. A congressional record, the proceedings and debates of the 76th Congress. And here it basically says, let me call your attention to the fact that on the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States, which appears on our dollar bills, you will find the exact symbol of the British Israel World Federation movement. This symbol is also carried on literature of other organizations promoting a world government and a world religion. And at the bottom of the circle surrounding the pyramid, you will find the wording Novus Ordo Seclorum, which is the new order that was advocated by Clinton Roosevelt several hundred years ago, and recently by the book Philip Drew, and is now being followed in this government, the United States, by the executive. The book is called Philip Drew. That really explains what is all of this symbolism means. It was written by a Colonel Edward Mandell House, and he was a very close confidant of President Woodrow Wilson. Edward Mandell House wrote a book about his ideas about world government. And here is the President Woodrow Wilson. And on the left-hand side, you will see Woodrow Wilson's friend, Colonel Edward Mandell House, who incidentally happened to be a member of the Illuminati. And here is Colonel Mandel House. Here he is with his wife in England. Here in the table of contents, you will see one of the chapters is a prophet of a new day. Another chapter was the exalted conspirators, the administration of the Republic, talking about a new administration here in America for the Republic. Drew outlines his intentions, a new era in Washington. And another chapter was called An International Crisis. And another one was the reform of the judiciary, a new code of laws for America. We can see that there's already a long time ago, at the time of the First World War, there was already a conspiratorial apparatus coming out of England to set a whole new agenda for America. And in the book, The Masonic Orders of Fraternity, written by Manly Palmer Hall, he's talking about the Illuminati and the secret societies, and he said these were the men of towardness, those sons of tomorrow, whose symbol was a blazing sun rising over the mountains of the east. And while it is difficult to trace the elements of a pattern never intended to be obvious to start with, the broad shape of a design is dimly apparent, an invisible empire taking over the world. An invisible empire which was not supposed to be understood to start with. But if you really study it, you begin to see that there is a conspiratorial apparatus to guide the destiny of America. And they were the men of towardness. Here we have the men of towardness, building a new world. George Bush and the communist leader. Here we have a new order of the nations. This was published by the United States military. Here's another book called America and the New Order, back in 1949. Here's New York, and then New York is referred to as the Empire State, which is the new British Empire, or the new, actually, Roman Empire. And so the new empire is here in New York. So New York is a center for incredible treason and all kinds of secret societies and money and all kinds of political machinations are going on in New York against the American Republic. We begin to see that all of this is connected behind the scenes by secret societies that want to be the directors of our destiny as a country and as a people. We need to look at a book by a man named James Billington. He wrote a book called Fire in the Minds of Men. James Billington is probably one of the finest historians America has ever been able to produce. James Billington today is the chief librarian for the Library of Congress. He is considered to be a master historian, and he's taught history in England and America, throughout the world. He's an incredible writer, fascinating his views on the ancient history and the history of the world today. He wrote a book called Fire in the Minds of Men, The Origins of the Revolutionary Faith. And in it, he explains all of the machinations going on in the minds of the guys who are putting this conspiracy together to overthrow the United States. In the introduction, he explains something very important. This is the introduction, one of the introduction pages, where James Billington says, quote, "A recent mythic model for revolutionaries, early romantics, and young Karl Marx, and the Russians of Lenin's time was Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods for the use of mankind. The Promethean faith of revolutionaries resembles in many respects the general modern belief that science would lead men out of darkness into light. But there was also a more pointed millennial assumption that on the new day that was dawning, the sun would never set. Early during the French upheaval, or the French Revolution, was born the idea of a solar myth of revolution. suggesting that the sun was rising on a new era for the world, in which darkness would be vanished forever. The image was implanted at a level of consciousness that simultaneously interpreted something real and produced a new reality. The new reality that these secret societies in the French Revolution, what they sought was a radically secular and stringently simple idea. The idea was not the balanced complexity of a new American federation, but the occult simplicity of its great seal on the back of on the top of the pyramid over the words Novus Ordo Seclorum. What he's saying is that Prometheus was a favorite of the ancient gods with the Illuminati because he brought light into the world. And so today at Rockefeller Center, the main picture and the main thing in the Rockefeller Center is Prometheus, who stole fire from God. Here we have the footnotes for the introduction, where you will see that the idea for the revolution, they talk about back in the 1800s, they talk about the year 2000 in New York. And I think that's interesting. As far back as the 1880s, they were talking about the revolution in New York in the year 2000. Well, that's what happened in about 2000 was 9/11. This begins to imply that there's a very powerful secret society working behind the world governments to overthrow the United States, and that 9/11 was part of it. Here's another footnote. In the back of the book, it says, even speculation about the year 2000 began not with the futurologists in 1960, but the dynamic work written back in the 1780s. The same figure who invented the word communist. The very idea of communism back in the 1780s, they talked about New York in the year 2000 would be a time when the whole government of America would be overtaken and overthrown. Well, it was. 9/11 has destroyed the whole concept of a freedom-loving constitutional republic. But most people are not aware of any of this. Now, let's look at some of the symbols of countries that use this rising sun for communist countries. Here we have in Romania, you'll see the rising sun behind the mountains. And this one is Mongolia, Armenia, Arizona, Illinois, Montana. This is Ohio, New York State. So in the book, Flags Throughout the Ages and Across the World, you'll see this entry says, the Soviet coat of arms, which is left, graphically presents the dawn of a new day for the entire world. Here we have another state arms of a country. The rising sun is a symbol of a new dawn for the country. The sun for Liberia, the sun which heralds the new day. Then you have the red dawn. This red flag represents communism. China has the rising sun. So these are just political symbols, but are all saying the same thing about a secret society's idea about how to overthrow the world of mankind. And you get the people to understand that they are going to be living like kings in a new world order. When all of this malarkey is all done away with peace and freedom and liberty and justice, and a constitutional republic is all overthrown and done away with, and now we will have a really wonderful world to live in, when we will all be equal and we'll all live under the dawn of a new day.
The truth probably dawned on me. It's almost over anyways, but my goodness, I'd say my big awakening probably 2015, 2016.
And the people buy into it because they don't know what.
But I had read a lot of books even as a kid. So even when I was in grade 6, I won the reading award, not only for how I was able to read in public, but also because of the amount of books I actually read. And I read a lot of science books, like fact-based books, and I wasn't into the like the fairy tales of the fiction. So I do I come from a very well-read background, even from a very young age. So
The
anyway,
words
that was
mean they
a
don't
good
know
play
where
on
it
words.
comes from.
I appreciate that.
So the bottom line is quite simply that the world that we live in today is totally and completely dominated by and guiding the destiny of America and the world, being guided by a secret society, a most powerful, well-organized, well-financed, highly intelligent secret society that has America by the throat and has the world through the United Nations and all other international organizations, banking fraternities, has the whole world in its arms and guiding the destiny of the human race, and we don't know it.